So, I just got out of the new horror movie Weapons, and I need to talk about it. I had a big problem with this movie. Well, two problems, actually. The first problem being that I can't talk about my second problem without spoilers, so spoiler warning from this point on. If you want to watch Weapons unspoiled, stop this video now, watch the movie, and then come back. Or don't, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Okay, with that out of the way, if you've seen the trailer, you know that Weapons centers around the mysterious disappearance of several children from an elementary school classroom, specifically all but one of the kids from one teacher's class, who all simultaneously decided to run away into the night at exactly 2:17 in the morning, supposedly never to return. Though we'll get to that. It's an intriguing conceit from the outset, and the story unravels in what at first blush seems like an interesting way, employing a non-linear, Pulp Fiction-style nesting structure revealing the same events from different points of view until the final explanation for what's going on. That explanation falls upon the film's main antagonist, a witch who has come to town to suck out the souls of children like a modern-day Pied Piper, using some weird voodoo blood magic involving twigs and hair to compel them like zombies. The thing is, prior to the start of the action, which takes place across a few days, the movie establishes that at least a month has gone by between the initial disappearances and the final resolution. This witch has been living in a house that she's essentially taken over, enthralling the two adults into zombified catatonia and holding them hostage so that their young son will continue to take care of them and the zombie children in the basement while she recuperates from some unnamed illness, spoon-feeding them Campbell's soup to keep them all alive. Which means, unlike traditional zombies who crave human flesh but have no stomachs and technically don't need to eat, these ones are still alive and need food. This, of course, begs the question that plagued me through the entire third act of this film. Have all of these walking coma victims been just peeing and pooping in their pants for like a whole month? It's never brought up, and I honestly don't know why. Now, you're probably asking, Ben, why do you care so much about this? What do you want from this movie? A scene where you see a bunch of kids standing around in a basement showing that they all have poop in their pants? And for the record, this isn't just a demand for realism. I am fully able to suspend my disbelief that a witch can manipulate people's minds with blood magic. What bothers me is the missed opportunity. So much of the horror of Weapons comes from seeing people struggle with having to live with trauma that they can't do anything else about but live with it. The adults are trapped in a state of torpor, their kids missing with no answers and increasingly little hope. The main kid, Alex, is trapped in a hostage crisis, forced into a routine of chores and obedience to a monster to keep his parents alive long enough to figure out a way out. It's a slow burn tension built around a series of sickening choices the characters are forced to make by a villain with seemingly no limits on the cruelty she's willing to inflict upon them. Just imagine, right after the witch callously tells the boy that he will need to feed his parents, she also drops an afterthought that he will need to clean them as well. Then, in the midst of the montage where he's going through the motions of his new torturous status quo, going to the store to buy more soup, etc., there's just a scene of his parents bent over the tub in the bathroom, their own son forced to wipe their asses, no emotion, just doing what needs to be done, a disgusting reversal of something that they no doubt would have had to do for him as a toddler only a few years ago. How creepy would that be? The routine becomes the banality of evil, the practical application of cruelty. Pretty sure that's what the Hannah Arendt book was about, right? So, why not do it? At first I thought they might have considered anything scatological to be too silly, too distracting from the buildup of dread, but considering the absolutely gonzo, almost joke ending, which I won't spoil, I can't imagine that was the case. Well, then I thought maybe they saw it as going too far, even for a movie where a guy throws up in his lover's face before headbutting him to death. But that can't be it, because this is written and directed by the guy who made Barbarian, a movie with a third act reveal so morally repugnant that me, the guy who cites Zardoz as his favorite movie of all time, put it at number 2 on my worst list for 2022, right behind Damien Chazelle's Babylon. Too far isn't a thing for this guy. The only conclusion I can come to is that the filmmakers behind Weapons just didn't think through the implications of their story, and that gets to the heart of why I found Weapons so disappointing. That for all of its intriguing setup and twisty storytelling gimmicks, it didn't give me anything more interesting to think about than where all the poop went. Earlier, I compared Weapons' non-linear POV-centric story structure to Pulp Fiction, and Weapons failed so hard for me that it actually made me question whether I love Pulp Fiction as much as I do. Every time the movie would cycle back with a new chapter and a new perspective, I just felt like something was wrong, and it took me a bit to realize what it was. When Pulp Fiction does the same thing, peeling back the onion to find more layers to the story you've already seen, the connections established between the individual stories are usually relatively tenuous, just there to show that all of these events are taking place in the same world, and sometimes at the same time, or at a point in the story different from where you thought. Otherwise, they are mostly self-contained. I can throw out some crap about how it emphasizes the chaos in the characters' lives, that they're all in their own ways unstuck in time and place, but I'm just pulling that out of my ass. Really, it's just a trick to make the story flow better. You could tell the story of Pulp Fiction linearly if you wanted to. It wouldn't be as fun, but it would still make sense, and more importantly, it would still be a feature-length film. Weapons could also be told in a much less fun linear format, but I suspect that if you did, cutting out all the extended sequences showing the same events from different angles, you'd maybe have a 30-minute short film. Tarantino used the non-linear gimmick to enhance his story, while Weapons uses it to conceal the fact that they didn't have enough to make a movie without it. It feels cheap and manipulative, and in keeping with an annoying trend in horror cinema over the last few years that I've always dismissively referred to as A24 horror after the company known for a lot of them, but not necessarily all of them. Slow-moving, sparsely told, atmospheric mood pieces more concerned with tone, theme, and imagery over plot, like the Terrence Malick equivalent of horror, which is to say unbearably boring and overrated. Whether it's It Follows, Hereditary, or last year's Longlegs, plot seems to have become a dirty word in horror movies nowadays. Why have satisfying setups and payoffs when you can just have spooky ambiance? You got a weird shape-shifting monster slowly following you everywhere? No need to explain why or how it works. It just is. Got a bunch of scary stuff happening to a family where you keep panning over to a dollhouse replica of the same family with no relevance to the story at all? Just have a scene where the characters reach into a random box, pull out a random book to a randomly highlighted page where all the demonic lore is literally spelled out for the audience, because that's enough. Oh, did you establish a weird supernatural crime spree where the fathers are compelled to kill their whole families? What could that be about? Oh, I know. This one weird guy really loves Satan. All the kids in the neighborhood mysteriously disappeared? I guess a witch did it for some reason. So what? You just want everything explained to you in excruciating detail, spoon-fed to you like you're a voodoo zombie with a month full of poop in your pants? I bet you just loved it when George Lucas came up with midichlorians to explain the Force, don't you? Can't we just leave some things ambiguous? Okay, first, everybody gets midichlorians wrong. They aren't the source of the Force, just a genetic marker for its presence. It doesn't change or ruin anything about Star Wars. Secondly, I'm not saying everything has to be an impenetrable lore dump with all mystery extinguished. I'm just saying that narrative ambiguity is all too often a crutch that bad writers use to fool you into doing their jobs for you. What Garth Marenghi said ironically, I believe literally. Thematic ambiguity is fine. A movie doesn't have to tell you how to feel or what to think about what it's doing, but it has to tell you what it is doing. The basic who, what, where, why, and how of it needs to be explained so you know what's going on and can then form your own opinions about it. When key pieces of information are left out, either deliberately to avoid over-explaining, or more often because they just didn't have any answers to obvious questions, the audience is left to interpret things that should be made clear, filling in the narrative gaps that the writer couldn't or wouldn't fill themselves. It's called storytelling, not story sharing. It's not a collaborative process. They do a thing, you react to the thing. Forcing you to piece together the story with half the pieces missing makes you feel special, like you're a part of it too, but it's ultimately a disservice to you and an insult to your intelligence. Atmosphere and stylistic novelty are not substitutes for good storytelling. But what about the themes, you say? Maybe the plot is a bit slight, but what is the movie really saying on a subtextual level? What is it really about? That's not a rhetorical question, I'm genuinely asking, because I can't for the life of me pin down what, if anything, the movie is trying to say. Now, that's not a deal breaker. Plenty of movies aren't necessarily about anything deep or profound, but when you have a movie like Weapons, or like many of the other horror movies I've mentioned, with all of the atmosphere and pointed absence of plot, an expectation naturally begins to form that something else must be going on, something that's just under the surface that we must glean along with the textual mystery of what's happening with all these missing kids. When you start the movie with images of empty classrooms and schools in crisis, clearly evoking the trauma of school shootings, and then have a dream sequence where an automatic weapon, one of two references to weapons that get us to the title, is floating in the air, you might think the movie Weapons might be trying to say something about, well, weapons, or American gun violence in general, wouldn't you? But it doesn't. It's just a hint of substance without the petty need to actually engage with anything on a substantive level, like a conversation starter prompt you might find at a card game for cocktail parties. Themes don't count if you don't actually say anything about them. Art should have a point. It's not just noodling around with form and execution. It is a statement you're making. And maybe that statement is as simple and straightforward as, this thing is funny, or this thing is sad, or this thing is scary. But if that's the case, don't try to suggest and thus claim credit for being any deeper than that. One of my favorite horror movies is Evil Dead 2, which is just a bunch of gore and slapstick. But it never has pretensions of being anything more than that, and doesn't try to fool you into thinking it's smarter or deeper than it is. That's my big problem with all of these so-called elevated horror movies. I don't think they fail at what they set out to do in a way that makes them bad. I think they succeed in doing what they set out to do, which is a bad thing. Empty vessels propagated by bullshit. A veritable load of poop in a zombie's pants. Honestly, I did not intend to extend that poop thing into a metaphor when I started this. My point is, the Emperor has no clothes, and the elevated horror movie has no story and no deeper meaning, but it wants you to think it does, so that you tell the rest of the story, you supply the meaning, and then you give them credit for not holding your hand when you did all the work. The movie ends on a contradiction meant to encourage this, revealing that, in fact, despite saying in the beginning that the kids never return, they do, but they aren't all there spiritually. Something has changed inside of them, and they never quite came back. Again, maybe this is a commentary on what happens to people and to a community after a tragic event like a school shooting. Or maybe it's just them working backwards from a creepy line and they hoped you wouldn't notice. But it feels profound, and that's what matters.